Moving on to the next slide. What does FM not do? And really, when you look at it, we're kind of like the Mikey from Life Cereal. I might be dating myself a little bit there. If you guys remember that commercial, give it to Mikey. He'll try anything. That's kind of what facilities is that we do get food services, mail services, fleet. I mean, we've had laundry, a number of things that get thrown underneath the facilities umbrella. And I think a lot of it is because quite often they don't know what to do with facilities, because when you think about it, the facilities organization, facilities departments most often report to human resources. Don't ask me why. I think it's mostly because they don't really know what to do with this. They will bounce us around where facilities reports to IT, or I've seen one where they're reporting to the general counsel to legal. So my ideal, of course, is for us as facilities to continue to elevate ourselves, and we'll talk about this, so that we are indeed a standalone department or division, if you will, where we've got a director or VP of real estate and facility management. But within that, we, of course, start getting all these other services that, again, they don't know what to do. I've seen it time and time again where some of these services, they've gone and basically tried to have a different department do them, and it just couldn't work. So they end up throwing it to facilities because, well, they'll figure it out. And we usually do. We've got a thick enough head. We're stubborn enough to figure out how to get the square peg into the round hole. We don't always do it eloquently, right? But at least they know that we're persistent enough, and we do figure it out. We're a pretty creative bunch. We're like the modern-day MacGyvers, if you will. But let's boil that down into what I'm going to call the 4 perspectives of FM. And when we look at it, just again, trying to simplify what it is that we classify as facility management. You've got managing and maintaining assets, providing and managing services, developing and managing budgets, and then building and managing relationships. And I hope you noticed that there was one key word in all 4 of those: managing. And that really is what we are supposed to be doing, especially if you're in that facility manager, director role. That is our primary function, is to manage these situations. And we're going to talk about that some in this session, but also we'll get more into it in the FM Leadership Series as well. But the first question I'm going to throw out there to everybody is, how many of you chose to either go to school for or basically chose to go into the facility management industry? So go ahead and use your little raise your hand icon there on the right, and just want to see a show of hands of how many of you actually chose to go into facilities. And I'm not seeing a single hand go up. And that doesn't surprise me at all. Now, that trend is changing within facilities, and we're going to talk about some of the industry trends, but there actually are degree programs out there. There are certificates that you can get through universities and colleges as well. And I know the last count that I saw, at least in the U.S., it was about 15 to 20 universities and colleges that have a degree program, or you can get basically, let's say, a construction management degree with an emphasis in facility management. They would count that underneath that 15 to 20. So whereas when I got into the industry, of course, I mean, that was not available. I wanted to go design cars. I'm a mechanical engineer by training, but my wife said she didn't want to move to Detroit. So I took the job that I landed at first, which was with facilities, and I've never left. So why would we want to work at facilities, especially those of you that maybe haven't been in it too long? One, you'll never be bored. If you get bored, you're not doing your job. Facilities is definitely something that will keep you on your toes, and sometimes it gets a bit redundant in the sense of, gosh, didn't we just deal with this problem yesterday? But that's part of our challenge, is figuring out how do we manage these problems on a day-to-day business, and then try to mitigate them and continue to improve. Now, why am I excited about the facility management industry? when you look at the trends that are going on, there is indeed a growing demand. The first reason is, some of you have heard me talk about this already, is that we do have an exodus of baby boomers. The predominant workforce that we've had for quite a while now, they're retiring at a pace of at least 10,000 a day is the latest number that I heard. So 10,000 of these workers a day are exiting the workforce. And that's creating strain, especially in the skilled labor department. Manufacturing companies are really worried about this. We've already got a couple million basically skilled labor shortages where they've got open job recs for skilled labor that they can't fill. And there's two reasons for that. One is, of course, the exodus of the baby boomers. The other is that, surprisingly, companies are starting to onshore jobs because after that long spell of offshoring, they realized that they were losing quality control, losing some of their trade secrets, et cetera. So they've brought some of those jobs and bringing more of those jobs back into the U.S. So that is creating a skill shortage. Well, that's going to impact us in the facility industry as well because we have skilled labor that take care of our buildings and our systems and even our management. So we have to backfill that. And yet there's not enough Gen Xers, and the millennials aren't exactly looking to get into facilities or skilled trades themselves. So we've got to, we know that the demand for our services, our skill sets are going to grow, but I think the demand on us that work in those environments is going to grow because they're going to be asking us to do more, and maybe not even more, but how to do things differently so that we're more effective in accomplishing the same task with, possibly reduced resources or maybe different resources. The other thing that I want to mention there is the FBPTA. That stands for the Federal Buildings Personnel Training Act. That was signed in 2010, which basically said that any facilities person, if you work in one of the federal buildings, either as a building engineer or a manager, and you could work for the federal government directly or as a contractor, they want you to have training. And they want you to have training that basically aligns with some of these, competencies, if you will, of how to operate and maintain, how to manage, et cetera, et cetera. So that's something that started in 2010, and we're starting to see that come around. I mean, it takes a few years, of course, for the wheels to get turning, but we're seeing that come around, and IFMA's stepping in to fill that void. I'm trying to do what I can to help fill that void. And why I see that as important to us as an industry, even if you're not in the United States and if you're not in the federal sector, is that within the U.S., the federal government is the largest landowner and largest tenant. The numbers for that, I just read in a recent article, were pretty astounding of the sheer amount of square footage that is occupied by the federal government. So essentially, whatever they get on board with, they're going to drag us all along through the sheer inertia of the mass of the square footage that they occupy. So in this case, I see that as a good thing. Now, how does that benefit us? What we're going to see is that increased recognized value given what we do within facilities. And the nice thing is that you've got employment opportunities that I think we'll start to see continue to increase. I think we're still kind of recovering from the recession depression. I'm sure some of you have been out there looking at the job market yourselves, but we're starting to see some of those opportunities come up. And when we do see them, they are more and more, the employers are looking for folks with training, with credentials, and that's something that's really important for us to keep an eye on too, because what I see is that means that they recognize the value of having trained, skilled personnel managing and operating their buildings. So that's really important. The other bullet point there that I'll mention is the outsourcing and specialization. We've been seeing this trend, of course, going on for the last decade easily, where managing facilities is maybe not that organization's core business. Whether they make widgets, they run a call center, whatever it is, that's not necessarily the core business. So you've been seeing this outsourcing to third-party companies that is their core business of managing facilities, which allows them to essentially be experts within that field, and they have a lot of the tools like a maintenance management system, processes, et cetera, that they're already in place. All they're doing now is taking them to that organization and applying them there. That could be good and bad depending on which side you're on. To me, I'll see the good side of it in that it is showing that there is indeed a required skill set necessary. So they're recognizing that, gosh, maybe we should really get somebody in here that knows what they're doing running these buildings. And then also, to me, it provides you that opportunity to maybe specialize in certain industries, specialize in certain areas, so that you can be that expert within one of those organizations or within the larger, the customer organization itself. And the last point I'll make before we move on is flexibility. I've had the opportunity to work in a variety of industries, meet a lot of great people. That's what I love about teaching classes, being involved with associations like IFMA and going to the different events, is that there's just a lot of great facility folks out there, and it doesn't matter, where you are in the U.S. or even internationally. The building's a building, and we can share a lot of knowledge with each other, and then you yourself have that flexibility to move to wherever. I mean, you can take your skill set, and you can go apply that same skill set in any industry. Each industry has its nuances, but really you apply the same methodologies, the same approach, as long as you've got a good understanding of buildings, of systems, and really, to me as a manager, the more important thing of how to manage those assets and how to speak the language of business, you have a lot of opportunities that are open to you. And then, of course, how do you then take advantage of that? How do you realize that success in facility management? And we'll talk about this in a little bit. Unfortunately, we're still seeing our industry maturing, if you will, that some of you may relate to this, that you're still very reactive, very firefighting mode. What we're trying to do is realize continuous improvement, continuing to raise the bar, if you will. You can do that through ongoing education, which we'll talk about, as doing something like this with the FM101 series, knowledge sharing, being involved with some other, whether it's IFMA, BOMA, whatever it is, being involved in networking with some of your fellow facility peers. Teamwork, we're going to take some little bit of time talking about the value of a team and the importance of each team member. That is going to be crucial to the success of the facilities management organization. And then something that really doesn't happen at all, marketing and selling. They always come knock on our door when it comes time to do cuts. So we have to get good at marketing and selling the value of our facility services. So we'll talk about that. And then the last point is strive for facilitopia. So to me, it's that utopia for the facility industry. And I like to basically describe that as I do think we should have within facilitopia. We should have basically a VP, some sort of executive or senior manager level that is responsible for just real estate and facility management, right? That makes to me a lot of sense. The second would be is that they continue to seek out those that have whether it's degrees, certificates, training, etc., in facilities to be the ones that actually take care of and manage the facilities. And through us continuing to show that value, return that value to the bottom line, hopefully we start getting pay that's really commensurate with the skill sets that is needed, both by those that are I'll say the wrench turners, if you will, and the ones running the systems, because you look at the skill sets that are needed by those folks, it's pretty high, especially if you get into a more complicated facility, and yet, especially depending on the geography, the pay grades are not there. Same for management level. The stuff that managers have to put up with, and when you look at we're managing the second largest asset and expense for most organizations, you probably think that we should be getting equivalent pay for managing those multi-million-dollar assets and budget. So the value of FM. So this is where we start looking at how do we communicate the value of facility management to all of our stakeholders. But first and foremost, we need to understand and realize the value of FM ourselves. And again, some of you that see me present before, I give this to anybody and everybody. It's called the rule of 100, 10, and 1. And essentially what this is taking a look at the relative order of magnitude of cost and expenses, if you will, of each one of these different assets. So when we look at the rule of 100, basically the largest asset and largest expense for most organizations is going to be the people, the productivity, right? That's where the money's made. their payroll will be, in most cases, the largest expense that an organization has. The second largest asset and expense is going to be facilities. And, showing this relative order of magnitude, you've got the $100, which really should be more like $300, $400, or $500, versus the $10 when it comes to facilities. And then lastly, the $1 is utilities. And that is typically the third largest expense for most organizations. Now, when you bring those all together, a lot of times the focus is really on cost, right? Where facilities were viewed as overhead, a necessary evil. I've been called a number of those things before in working in facilities, and we even ourselves see it, well, we're just a cost center. That's what we do. And yeah, you're right. Are we the ones producing the widgets? No, we're not the ones directly making the money. However, our facilities have a direct impact on productivity. Simple little things, and that I've got a couple different articles on my website that give you some more information on this, and I actually reference some of the studies. But simple little things like temperature and humidity, so occupant comfort. If folks start getting a little too warm or a little too cold, studies have shown that for every 1 degree that they get outside that comfort zone, there's a 2% drop in productivity. Okay, so now if you've got 500, 600, 700 people sitting in your building, and they start losing 2%, 4%, 6% productivity, that's a lot of money. I mean, that could add up to be easily a couple $1,000,000 a year, and that's just in cost. Now if you flip around to the productivity side, where it's usually going to be double that amount, that's a chunk of change, all because you're not able to control the building within that comfort zone. Well, gosh, that's probably good justification for us to maybe get a control system, for us to make further improvements to the building, get some additional resources because I can't keep up with all the maintenance of the facility, or help us with our capital planning, and we're going to talk about that too. So it's important for us to understand our business. How do they make money? If it's a for-profit company, what's their profit margin? Because you get something like retail, like in grocery. You look at hospitals. Some of those industries, they've got very, very thin margins. I mean, you're talking single-digit margins, profit margins. And so you could say, well, I could save you 10 grand. That's cost. But they go, it's only $10,000. But when you flip that around and go, well, yeah, but you only make a 5% profit margin, so that $10,000, you would have to make what is that, like I think $2 million in revenue to net $10,000. I'm thinking I'm getting the bean counter's attention when I start talking that language. So that's where we have to make sure that we understand our organization. Maybe if you're a service provider, the clients that you work with, understanding their organization so that you can see how this facility impact them. I'll give you one more example before we move on. Filters, the simplest maintenance that we can do, changing air filters. Another study that showed that they basically had put in new air filters, measured the productivity of folks, and this is done at a call center. Most of these studies are done at a call center because it's easy for them to measure throughput. And then they went and put in the old dirty filters back in and measured productivity. It dropped by 9%. So simply by changing air filters, so you're affecting the indoor air quality, you could affect productivity of the staff, the occupant, by almost 10%. That's huge. So surely you can use numbers like that to start justifying improvements and justifying resources to more staff, outsourcing, whatever it is, so that you can get what you need to do a better job. But it is important for us to understand that value of FM. And we'll hit on this rule of 110 as we continue to progress. Next point that I want to talk about is the value of a team. And I had an article that I just put out called glorified, or more than a glorified janitor. And I started that article off basically saying this is not a dig at janitors and custodial at all. In fact, it's quite to the contrary, because when you look at the value that each individual member plays on that team, you guys have heard the saying that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. That is very much true in this case, because you can't have a robust facility program if you don't have a good manager, good supervisor, good maintenance staff, and of course custodial, grounds, and then security and contractors. And you look at the role that each one of those plays, where the manager, I mean, they've got to lead the organization. They have to sell the value of what the facilities organization provides to upper management, to other departments, and then of course they have to make sure they're being mindful and equipping their staff to be successful, so that they themselves can have job satisfaction, but also continue to improve the overall facilities program and return value to the bottom line. Supervisors, same thing. They have to lead their respective team. They have to figure out, how can I do things, basically do things efficiently? How can we get the most done with the resources we have? And then how do I continue to grow my staff? Again, keeping them, basically happy, keeping them on board, because as we continue to see that strain within resources, we can't afford to lose people. So we want to keep those folks working for us, especially if they're good skill sets, et cetera. We've invested in them. We want to make sure that they stay happy and continue to improve and grow within the organization. The maintenance staff themselves, they're the ones directly overseeing the day-to-day operations of the assets. How well they maintain them, how well they operate them will definitely affect productivity. And then, of course, identifying and mitigating risk. And sadly, in today's day and age, we all kind of need to think like lawyers a little bit. What risks are hanging out there? Once we realize that it's a risk, what are we doing to mitigate, minimize, or remove that risk? So those things are all important for us to understand, and that goes for all levels. Custodial and ground, those both run hand in hand, but from a safety standpoint, you've got the aesthetics, which studies also show that aesthetics drive how people feel about the workplace, reduce stress, increase productivity, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of things that go into something as what we may see as, it's custodial, it's grounds. No, it's custodial and grounds. It says a lot. Your corporate image. What do you want people to see? What do you want people to think? What do you want them to feel as they come onto your site to consider doing business with you? All very important things to consider. Security, safety, risk, and then, of course, they're going to tie back to image as well, because quite often when you walk into a building, the first person you meet is going to be security. So how they interact with the customer, how they interact even with your own contractors and employees will make a big difference. I've got one example where one of my fellow facility managers was sharing how their security guard, he cheats a little bit, but I got to give him kudos for this. People have to badge in as they come in. And as they badge in, their face, right, shows up on the screen, sitting with him behind the security desk, and along with their name. But he really honestly does know most folks' names. You're talking like 1,300 people that are in this building. But as they come in, he's the smile. He's the one that welcomes them. He's the one that greets them by name, and they all feel special. They feel important, and you do. You see it lift their face. So, security can have a huge impact on just even how people feel and, of course, their productivity. So now let's get into some of the primary components, and this is really what's going to comprise the remaining sessions in the FM101 series. So we're going to get, I guess, kind of more into the meat here, if you will, and then some of these we're going to hit in the FM Leadership series and the Operations and Maintenance series. But we're going to cover each one of these today, at least at a high level. So vision, mission, goals, operations and maintenance, a capital replacement program, and I'll explain to you what that is, emergency preparedness, project management, and of course real estate property management, sustainability and efficiency, and then lastly, but definitely not least, managing relationships. So let's look at vision, mission, goals. I want to see a show of hands here again. How many of you have a vision statement, mission statement, something to that effect for your facilities department? Can I see those? Raise their hands. Okay, I've got one. Any others? Okay, good. So we're getting a couple of you, and that's great. That is great. Now, how many of you, let me ask this question. How many of you know what your organization, so basically your overall organization, how many of you know what your organization's vision or mission is? All right, all of you, perfect, perfect, that's great. That's the first hurdle, right, is we have to understand the organization itself. Because really when you look at this, when you establish vision, mission, goals, what we're trying to do is get out of the weeds of the day-to-day firefighting, and this is really difficult to do, especially when you've got a small team. And I've seen this, again, far too many times where they hire a manager that they're trying to get them to be at that strategic level and drive change, but then inevitably they get sucked into the day-to-day firefighting because it's just so overwhelming. If you are in that position, and try your hardest to even dedicate some of your time, days, whatever it is, to being at that strategic level and establishing these vision, mission, goals, because you have to set some sense of direction for you, for the team, and definitely for your facilities organization. And then that direction is what you're communicating to your other stakeholders, especially upper management, as you're trying to justify improvements. So I see Brandon has his hand up. Do you have a question there, Brandon? If you want, you can type that in. Okay, hand just went down. So, all right, making sure we're good there. If you do have a question, yeah, please raise your hand or feel free to type it in. But to think strategically, we do have to make sure that we understand the organization's vision, mission, goals, which you all indicated that you do know them. And then we have to, of course, understand that rule of 100-1. How does what we do impact the productivity of the overall organization, but also each respective department? And we'll talk about that more in the leadership series. And then once you understand that business, when you go to message and market yourself, you're leveraging the facility's vision or mission statement. And again, I'm not saying you got to come up with a vision statement and a mission statement and the goals. Sometimes I kind of do just a morph where I'm looking at it more from a marketing standpoint, where I want a tagline. I want something that's going to be concise, that I will put on the top of a lot of the, like a business case, any type of proposal I'm putting forward. I will put that tagline up top because I want upper management and the other department heads that I'm meeting with, I want them to know what it is basically that we're trying to do. And then, of course, I'm going to make sure I use some of the key words that they have in their organization, their organization's vision, mission, goals, so they see that I'm aligning and I'm tying in. But we'll definitely talk more about that in the first session of the leadership series. Okay, try to get the slide to transition here. There we go. So now let's look at operations and maintenance. Now, when we look at operations and maintenance, that is a very, very broad umbrella. We will spend the next few sessions of this series actually talking about operations and maintenance to some extent, and then the operations and maintenance series itself is a 6-part series that we're going to go into each of the different building systems and so forth. So we'll look at that at the end of today's session. But when you look at operations, simple definition, the operating of systems really in accordance with their purpose. Unfortunately, sometimes, their purpose versus design has changed. But again, we're trying to make sure we run them efficiently so that we do use our resources well. The other thing we have to do is we're trying to basically optimize productivity at the least amount of cost. I mean, that is kind of the primary role of a facility manager, is to balance that. We're mitigating as much cost as possible, but yet the main focus to me is more driving productivity. In which you get, takes us back to having to understand what is that productivity and what are those costs, and be able to communicate in that language. Because you can have something where, and we've had this a few times, and I know I've used this example before, is where you have an executive maybe comes back from a conference, and he has the idea to adjust set points. Thinking that, hey, if we adjust our set points by, a couple degrees each way, we'll be able to save X amount in energy. Which, okay, hey, that's great. And they're throwing that idea at you. But you need to be thinking about, well, great, we're going to save $1. I think of that rule 110. Well, we're going to save $1 in utility costs. But I also know that if I start getting outside that comfort zone, I'm going to start getting people complaining and being uncomfortable, which means they're not going to be productive. We're going to reduce their productivity, which I'm going to lose $100. But then when they start making those phone calls, who are they calling? They're calling you. And so your facility staff now has to take their time away from doing their PMs and other maintenance to go out and, read the temperature and say, well, it's within the set points, and then explain to them, the initiative, what we're trying to do, et cetera. So you just lost another $10 on the facility side, all to save $1. That doesn't make sense to do that. But unless we understand that productivity and cost aspects, we can't ourselves go and explain that to management. Where we have that conversation, well, gosh, sir, ma'am, I think that's a great idea. I'm excited to see that you want to do things to operate more efficiently. Here's why we've considered that, but why we chose not to change the set points, and explain to them the productivity and how it impacts the bottom line. Let them see you think as a business person, but then you say, but we do have some ideas that really pretty minimal investment, that we could realize savings, and we actually think even it'd be increased productivity. Things like that. Retro commissioning is an idea. So we've got, we'll talk about that as well. Occupant comfort, I've already mentioned temperature control, humidity as well. There was a study that showed that once it started getting a little too dry, and I'm trying to remember, I want to say it was below 30% humidity, which unfortunately in my neck of the woods is pretty common. They had productivity drop by 7%, just because people's eyes started drying out, and they had a harder time reading their screen, processing emails, whatever it is. So, being able to control, again, the comfort space is pretty key. Lighting has a huge impact on occupant comfort productivity, whether it's too much or too little. You've got natural daylight, which is great. It reduces stress, helps you be more productive. But then we also have to make sure that we balance that with glare, and do the changes necessary there to help manage glare. And then lastly, with operations, customer perception. And we'll talk about managing relationships, but part of that is managing expectations, but also managing perception. One of my Johnisms is that perception is 9/10 reality, and sometimes more. So what folks see of how things are going is really what they're going to believe, and that's going to be their perception. So we have to basically manage that perception, and also make sure we're discerning how they think we're doing. And we'll talk more about that in the leadership series. Now, maintenance itself. Maintenance, is basically us keeping the systems in adequate working order, right? We do that through scheduled maintenance. We've got emergencies and repairs, right? Corrective maintenance, because we can't prevent every failure, and we shouldn't try to. We have service requests, and that could even tie back to the operation side, but service requests that come in from the occupants. And you really, to me, our two main goals is to minimize impact to productivity, so basically minimize downtime, and then also mitigate risk. So what are those risks to productivity, but also what are the risks to people that we have to make sure we're keeping, mindful eye of. But when it comes down to it, sadly, we are our own worst enemy. Most maintenance organizations operate between 10 to 40% efficiency, and that's from Maintenance Technology Online. So if most maintenance organizations are only operating between 10 to 40% efficiency, that means they're 60 to 90% inefficient. So if we're 60 to 90% inefficient, and we want to go and ask for more money, I think we're going to have a hard time getting more money, because management's going to look at us and go, well, you haven't done a very good job of what I've given you already. So that's where we have to change that perception, and really that comes down to changing how we do things. And that's a lot of what, this session is definitely more of a high-level introductory. As we dive into these other sessions and other series, I want for us to start getting into how do we improve our organization, how do we make it more efficient and increase that efficiency. Second bullet point there, nearly 70% of failures are self-induced, and that's through MT Online. I know my experience, it seems like it's more like 90% of the failures are self-induced, especially when you look at, let's say, deferred maintenance being probably the primary cause of failure. Well, that essentially is self-induced, because we either haven't justified well enough the need to get capital dollars to to upgrade or replace the equipment, or management has chosen not to give us the funds necessary to upgrade the equipment. And then the last bullet point there, most organizations spend at least half their time on emergency work, basically corrective repairs. So let me ask this question to you. How many of you would say that you spend, your facilities organization spends at least half their time doing corrective repairs? So, okay. So we're looking at about, yeah, 50 to 60% of you. So, and that's about right. I did a webinar the other day. We talked about predictive maintenance, asked the same question, and it was very similar, where we had about half, well, actually, yeah, about half were, 50% or, higher when it comes to being reactive. So we have to work to change that. And moving to the next slide here. Get that delay. Now, why do we need to get away from reactive? You've got the no more firefighting. And, when we are reactive, we're in firefighting mode. And as cool as, that may look, you look at the guy there on the right, the firefighter, yeah, he looks pretty cool. But really, when it comes down to firefighting, there's very few folks that I've come across that enjoy it. I mean, there's some, some folks that they like the adrenaline rush that comes along with it. But most of us, we're just getting burned out. It's tiring. It seems like it always happens around the holidays and birthdays. I can't tell you how many times I've had to step outside of, a friend's birthday party or even, your own kid's. Of course, you've got, downtime and business loss that's associated with that, and then the customer satisfaction, which, as we have more emergencies, they're just going to look at it like, Josh, you guys aren't really doing your job. Okay. The upper bullet points, the cost of reactive maintenance. Maintenance Technology Online, another study that I had read years ago, was that they found that reactive maintenance costs 3 to 5 times more than if you would have done PMs to begin with. So DOT actually did a study, and they're found that it was 8 times higher to be reactive than if they would have been doing the PMs anyway. So, and that, to me, that's just the cost. That's just the $10. It's really when we look at those lower bullet points, we start looking at the $100 of going, yeah, it might cost us more, but really it's impacting productivity. I mean, one little shutdown could mean millions of dollars depending on your industry and what you're doing when it comes to impacting the bottom line. So it is very costly to have that. The other thing that I would say with the no more firefighting is you need to make sure you're capturing that information. And as much as we might want to try to hide, those black eyes, if you will, a lot of those aren't our fault. I mean, it's deferred maintenance. And we're going to talk about that. But we have to be able to quantify and use that information to go justify the improvements that we need to make in our organization. Otherwise, we will continue to stay in a firefighting mode. This one here, the value of a robust program. So let's flip this around. We were looking at the negative. Let's look at the positive. If you've got, this is IFMA finding this, that, if you have a robust facilities program, you can increase production by 28%. Okay, so that's that $100. So if we increase production by 28%, really, what does that equate to? And again, you're going to have to understand your organization how. What's the average, something simple way to calculate this is go talk to your CFO, your controller, somebody high up in finance, and ask them, what is the average burden rate per employee? Okay, so that's your cost. And they're probably going to tell you around $100,000. So that's a pretty typical rule of thumb, but with cost of insurance, that's going up. The other thing that you would want to ask them is, what is the average revenue per employee? And hopefully they're going to give you something like $200,000, $300,000 per head. Because now when you start doing your math and saying, if we can increase production by 28% and each employee, revenue is $300,000 per head, and I've got 1,000 people sitting in this building, those numbers add up real quick. Doubling the productivity of staff. So within our own facilities organization, we double the productivity of staff, which, yeah, we can equate that to productivity, but I'm also going to look at that as, it's a reduction in cost at the $10 level, at the facilities level, because now I'm getting more out of my staff by having a robust program. Something as simple as corrective maintenance. I mean, I've seen this. I was looking at, had one client that was looking at their financial records. They didn't have a maintenance management system. I couldn't assess, how many corrective work orders were they doing. They weren't, of course, couldn't capture labor hours and whatnot from that. So I just had to look at their financial side and figure out what's going on. And one thing came very evident to me is that for this really small organization where they only had, I think 5, if memory serves, 4 or 5 building engineers, including the chief engineer, on any given day, they were doing 3 trips to the parts store. And, so they got 3 separate trips to the parts store, and I can guarantee you that they didn't always just go one guy by himself. So you're having a really huge loss in productivity, all because you're in that firefighting mode, but also it's how you're dispatching that corrective maintenance, because you're sending your skilled labor to go out there, troubleshoot it, figure out what's going on, realize they don't have the part, go to the store, get the part, and you've got break, and then eventually you got lunch break, and then they come back and they do the repair, and they're done for the day. And they got one thing accomplished. That is very unproductive, so we need to get to where we're a lot more efficient. And we'll talk about how we can do some of those things in leveraging technology, especially when we get to the operations and maintenance series. Reduce maintenance costs by as much as 50%. That was on facilities net. And I've seen similar numbers to that a few different times, where you can reduce your overall maintenance costs by as much as 50%. And when you tie that back to what we saw in the previous slide with the no more firefighting, you can see how those numbers would add up. And then the last one, reduce energy use. So we're hitting the 110 and 1 as we work down this slide here. Reduce energy use by 15 to 20%. I've seen this myself. Something as simple as misalignment. So you've got your belt, your belt misaligned on your sheaves, pump and motor misaligned. That's easily about a 15% energy savings just by aligning it correctly. Never mind the additional wear and tear and strain you're causing on the equipment, the increased frequency of breakdown, where you've got to change the belts more frequently or you've got to change the bearings more frequently, which of course means it's going to cost you more money from a maintenance side, but it's also going to start impacting productivity because you have to shut down to do that maintenance. So there's all these things add up that you can see how making these improvements in your facilities program will indeed increase productivity, reduce your cost, and also improve efficiency. But digging out. So let's say, as we indicated, right, where a good 50 to 60% of you, indicated that you were in a reactive, pseudo firefighting mode at least. You can't get out. It took you a long time to get into that hole. You will not get out overnight unless you've got truckloads of money to throw at it and can pull in a whole bunch of resources and make a lot of capital improvements. It won't happen overnight. So there's really, I think, 2 key components you need to help you dig out of this. One is going to be improving your operations and maintenance program, and we'll talk about that on the slide here a little bit. And then also the other will be a capital replacement program. We'll talk about that in the next couple slides. Your target PM to CM ratio, that's basically the number of PMs, preventive maintenance or scheduled maintenance, that you do versus corrective maintenance or emergency maintenance, depending what you want to call it. So your PM to CM ratio should ideally be 80 to 20. Unless you're in a critical environment like a hospital, data center, a power industry, you should be more of a 90-10. Most organizations are probably going to be closer to flip-flop of that, where they're 20-80 instead of 80-20. Some of the things that you can do to start digging out of that hole is, one, you have to be able to prioritize. You got to prioritize your preventive maintenance work orders with respect to your corrective work orders and your service requests. And I've seen folks that have their occupants love them. They're Johnny on the spot when it comes to doing service requests, so customer satisfaction is high. The downside is that because they are responding quickly to every single service request, they're not able to get their PMs done. And if they're not getting their PMs done, then that's going to lead to more reactive maintenance. So they need to be able to use a tool like a maintenance management system to help them prioritize each one of those different type of work orders and then schedule them accordingly. Part of that may mean that you have to go and manage client expectation. And that's just part of how do we work with them as we go around. Essentially, this whole management by walking around, and when we get to managing relationships. When you are out there interacting with the clients, you know you get the hey you work orders, as I call it, right? As you're walking down the hallway, hey, while you're here, can you fix X, Y, Z? Simple response to them is, yes, we'd love to. Here, I'll call in and put in the work order for you. Or, you could call our facility service desk, or, you could go online and put in a service request, and then we'll schedule that accordingly and get that done as soon as possible. Because you're educating them that, one, there's a process, and two, that they are important, but I have to prioritize and schedule them. And then you can even add in there, because I'm off to this business planning meeting, or well, we've got to go finish this PMs on the chiller. So they're realizing that there's other things going on behind the scenes that they're unaware of. Again, trying to steer away from that stereotype of the glorified janitor, where all they think we do is hang dry erase boards, punch toilets, and change light bulbs. Because that's a lot of what they see on a day-to-day basis. Some of the ways that you can get out of that is, and I've seen this work a few different ways, is where folks will actually take their facilities team, their staff, and they'll set aside, let's say you've got 5 staff members. They'll set aside, 1 or 2 of them to go do the PMs. And then the others can be, the service requests, corrective maintenance, basically the stuff that happens during the day. And then as you start, getting over that hump, you're going to see that switch where now I can put 3 people doing PMs, and eventually 4, and then maybe you just leave the 5th one there. It's kind of your floater that's doing the service request and corrective maintenance. But that's you making that transition from a reactive to a more proactive or scheduled maintenance program. But again, that will take some time. The other thing that you can do, especially if you're set up as a kind of distributed where, well, I've got this person's dedicated to that building, this person's dedicated to this building over here. A little tougher for you to do that, the scenario I just gave you. Set aside days. Make Tuesday and Thursday be PM day, and then Monday, Wednesday, Friday are your service request and corrective maintenance day. Except for those, emergency maintenance that has to be done that day. Those top priorities. But that again requires you to have a system that helps you to prioritize and schedule. And as you start making that transition, you will see that you're able to get more days or more staff dedicated to doing PMs and being more proactive. But what that requires you to do is, this all stems back to having that vision and mission and making sure that your team's on board with that you've communicated that to upper management, you're getting some of those tools and resources that you need because you have that plan for the long haul, because it will take time to get out of this hole. Which leads me to the next slide, which is capital planning. And unfortunately, today's day and age, our capital planning is kind of more of us just doing Band-Aid fixes because we have accumulated a lot of deferred maintenance. And unfortunately, the budgeting approach that I see most frequently, and I've been guilty of this myself, so I'm throwing myself under the bus there too, is the Oliver Twist approach, as I call it, where we put together our Excel spreadsheet every year, and when we go into our annual budget meeting, we have the spreadsheet, and we go and put it in front of management, and we've got our big laundry list with all the different items on there and the cost, and we basically go with, again, Oliver Twist of, may I have more, please, right? We're asking for more, and knowing that we're only going to get maybe the top 2, 3, 4, 5 items on our list. And then when we'll come back next year, all those items that were on the list, except for the top 3, 4, 5, are going to be there. Plus, we'll have more to add on. That's not a capital plan at all. And in fact, your list gets longer. That means you keep digging a deeper hole, and we're going to continue to stay in the firefighting. So part of that is we have to quantify what are the costs of those Band-Aid fixes. So if I'm having to nurse a rooftop unit along that's already beyond its end of life, but I'm continuing to have to do all these Band-Aid fixes, what is that costing us? There's a maintenance cost to it, but then there's also a production cost side of it. So let's make sure that you're capturing those in the maintenance management system so that you can then quantify when you go to present your budget, and we'll talk a little bit more about this on the next slide. When you go to present your budget, you have hard data that you can say, look, this is what it's costing us to continue to nurse this along. And so you have to use that as justification. Now, the next slide gets into basically how do you put together a capital replacement program? And again, we're going to have an entire session on this. Capital replacement program, I like to give them a 1, 3, 5, and typically a 10-year look ahead. Now, as you move further away, so the 1 year and even a 3-year, those are fairly dialed in. I mean, the 1 year, yes, is going to be pretty dialed in on what the budget estimates are. The 3-year, it should be closer. Then you move to 5 and 10. Those are more, I'll call ROMs, right? Rough order of magnitude estimates, so that at least I have budget placeholders out there. Because when you look at it, every piece of equipment, every system has an anticipated life cycle. And so at the end of, let's say, 15 years, I should budget to replace my RTUs. So when that RTU or sub unit becomes 15 years old, I should plan to replace it. Well, how much is it going to cost to replace it? I need to budget for that, and that should be on that capital replacement program schedule. And the reason for that is, I'll give you an example. When I was at Microsoft, they had, oh boy, we had 7 million square feet, 7 to 8 million square feet alone in the Seattle Puget Sound area. Most of that, of course, on the one campus, and then 10 million square feet total. Well, a lot of that square footage was built during the 90s, and Microsoft knew that they had a lot of capital expenditures coming up because all those buildings were reaching some of those critical points of 10, 15, 20 years old. And they were going, yeah, we don't know how much that's going to cost us. We don't know when the wave's going to hit or how high it's going to be. Well, by going out and assessing all the facilities, putting together the condition assessment, of each of the systems in the buildings, the cost to replace or upgrade each one of those respective systems, and then putting that against a schedule and a calendar, yeah, it was ugly. I mean, it looked more like a tidal wave or a tsunami because of when it was all coming. You can't manage to that. And that's really, these whole roller coaster budgets that, let's say we were going to start doing this, we know that most commonly, you've got your big ticket replacements happen on the 5, 5, 10, 15, 20, so forth, 30 years. That's when your big ticket replacements happen. And if you've got a portfolio that, just happens to have those 5s coinciding, you can get a really crazy budget cycle. Well, that's not anything that, one, you want to put forward, where you've got like the schizophrenic budget, but two, it's very difficult for upper management to be able to manage to that because you're giving something that goes up and down. I need 20 million this year and 2 million next year. That's not manageable. So you then have to go, all right, well, let's push some items, pull some items in, and we're going to smooth out that spend. And that's really what we're going for, is that we give them a budget that year over year, there's no surprises. Maybe behind the scenes, we're jockeying things, and changing their position because, hey, this degraded faster than what we thought, or business needs changed, or and this, equipment here is actually, the roof's still looking good. We can get another year out of the roof. Well, that's good because we need to, replace the chillers this year. So you can move some things around on the back side. But on the front side, when you present the budget, hey, it's the same amount as last year plus inflation. It's staying pretty steady. It's got your plan, and it makes it a lot easier for them to go and rubber stamp what you're doing. And then also, I think the key thing, this is where I said on the previous slide, make sure you capture how much the corrective maintenance, the Band-Aid fixes are costing you, because they need to see the realization of the consequences of their decision. So if they say, well, we can't afford to do that this year, okay, but what you're not approving this year is going to go into what I have budgeted for next year, and it's a cascade effect. So there's different software programs out there that will actually help you do this automatically, but you can do this yourself somewhat easily using Excel and also your maintenance management system. I've got some articles on that, and we'll talk more about that when we get into the O&M and leadership series. And then selling your plan. That, it's one thing to have the data put together, which is a huge step, and the biggest hurdle into doing that is, of course, getting it all together in the beginning. And you can phase it, you put in the capital plan together. You can start at a higher level and then start working your way down, but start somewhere. But once you get over that hurdle, then you're just maintaining it and keeping that information going. So it's a lot easier to maintain the information. And you got to move into that selling mode. where how do you sell your business needs? And that's where you've got I got a couple articles that you could look at, and we'll talk more about this as well. The in-your-face business case, as I call it, where it's a very concise, all on one page, at least the key points that they're looking for. Because when I go to a budget meeting, a meeting with upper management, trying to get them to buy off on a business case, whatever it is, I don't want them thumbing through my 20, 30 pages of my justification, and all I do is give them a bunch of verbiage. I have a executive summary that's a half-page long. That's a lot of text. Nowadays, everybody has ADD. We got too much data coming in at us. We can't sit there and filter through all the text and all of our, great reasonings. We have to give them very concise. And me as an engineer, I kind of like this because we speak in bullet points. But very concise bullet points that we can identify how do we present this business case to them. And sell it to them on one page, and I don't want to lose them coming through the packets. I want them to stay engaged with me as I'm presenting this information to them in person. And then the make a negative a positive is where how do you take bad events, right, emergencies, where, gosh, remember when that chiller went down and you were having a big board meeting and it got really hot in there? Yeah, well, why did that happen? Well, because the chiller is 32 years old. That's why that happened. We need to replace it so that we don't have something embarrassing like that happen again. Take that negative, make it a positive, and help those executives to remember those pain points where instead of hiding and going like, shoot, we screwed up again, no. It's not our fault. We're doing our best. Let's try to make sure we highlight those and use them to our advantage. Okay. Now I'm going to move into emergency response management, because really we can't, eliminate all failures. We shouldn't even try. And we've been talking a lot about prevention, of how do we have a robust maintenance program to try to mitigate or minimize these emergencies. But inevitably, something will happen. And so we have to prepare. And, unfortunately, when I ask most facility folks, do you have an emergency response management program? I will usually get a yes. But then as I dig further, I start realizing that really what they're talking about when they think they have an emergency response management program is that their organization has a disaster recovery or business continuity program. So they've got their big document and their game plan. But what you as facilities don't have is your procedures, your documents that show, well, how do we support that disaster recovery or business continuity plan? Right? We should have emergency operating procedures. We should have call trees or escalation protocols. We should have training, drills, etc. All these things come together to give you an emergency response management program. So we need to, again, that's something that we have to put together so that we're not making it up as we go along at 2 in the morning on Christmas Eve, which unfortunately happens all too often as well. So where do we start? Emergency response management, one, it goes back to knowing your organization, which we've talked a lot about that. As a manager or director, you need to understand who the players are, how it's money made, what's important. And when the organization puts together their disaster recovery and business continuity, they should be identifying that for you. They should be telling you that, well, this needs to come on first, then this department, then that department. Because if you go talk to those departments individually, they're all going to say, hey, we're important. And they are. But it's the upper management, it's executives telling you, these are the folks who need to come on first. So that means you have to understand, how do I now create my procedures and our processes to make sure that those people do come on first. And then if there's any risk or any potential problems hanging out there as to why they couldn't come on, what's our plan? Is it to move them from, position A to position B, right, move them to a different space? Is it, well, we need to actually put them, get a UPS and put them on generator backup? Those are the type of discussions that you need to have to figure out how your facilities and your process procedures support that organization. Major components of an emergency response management program are going to be your escalation protocol. And it's basically, who do you call? This is really important because, especially when you have an event that unfortunately captures the attention of the media, the last thing that you want is for the executives to get a microphone stuffed in their face and ask, sir, I heard you had a fire at your building. What do you think about that? Or what's going on there? And they're looking like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Trust me, you're getting a phone call and they won't be happy about it. So you've got an escalation protocol where as an event happens, you need to know who do I need to contact, who needs to know, and then as that moves upstream, each of those people have their responsibilities of who they need to contact so that the CEO can respond and say, yes, we are aware of that, our team is on it, and our first priority is, of course, taking care of the people and then restoring productivity as soon as possible. Okay, perfect, move on, right? That's what they're trying to do, but we need to have an escalation protocol in place. It also works for you from a facility standpoint in who do you contact? Who are your different contractors, your different service providers? Do you have their 24/7 number? Do you have the right person's cell number? And then let's say a generator fuel. Do you have 2 different suppliers? Different things like that that all go into this escalation protocol just to make sure that, again, if it's 2 in the morning on a Christmas Eve, you know who to contact, and you're able to get a hold of them and resolve the issue as quickly as possible. The next thing you will need are emergency operating procedures. For those of you that have bought the FM101 series, I do have an EOP template, as an example on there, so that you can see what that looks like. And we're going to talk more. We have a session all about emergency response management in this series as well. So we'll talk more about this and how do you create emergency operating procedures. And then the next thing that you would have is drills. So when it comes to drills, how often do you have them, what do they look like, et cetera. Moving on to project management, this is one that we're actually going to dive into in the leadership series. But I think when it comes to project management, and then I'm going to look at this at a big construction at this with this example here of a new construction of a building, a larger renovation, if you will, where quite often facilities is kind of kept at an arm's length, maybe at a couple arm's length, because they don't want us getting in there and messing things up and asking too many questions, making life difficult. They just want to keep us safely out of the way, whereas we're the ones that are going to have to live with that building or whatever decisions that get made. So we want to be invited to the table. So that's one of the things that we'll talk about is building those relationships beforehand, making sure that we get invited to the table. And then, of course, when we do show up and get invited to that construction table, we are there as a value-added team member, one of the experts, if you will, helping them define the solutions, providing value to the conversation, and not being, the Mr. or Mrs. Negative that's saying, well, that won't work, or this is what you guys have done in the past, you guys keep screwing things up. Because that's kind of the attitude that I've seen some facility folks come into, and guess what? They don't get invited back to the table after that. So we got to come in as a value-added partner and contribute and provide value to the organization and to that meeting, because we want to be involved from the pre-design stage all the way through construction and of course, through that transition operations as we start to own the building. The other thing for us to consider here is the last bullet point on this slide, TCC, total cost of construction, versus TCO, total cost of ownership. Your architects, engineers, your GC, those folks are going to be looking more at the total cost of construction because that's their driver, right? I need to get the job done for this amount, and I need to get it done within this schedule. And here's the requirements that are put on me. This is where we as facilities provide the most value, I think, especially if we get invited to the table, is that we're saying, okay, well, this is how we need it to perform. And then when you can evaluate, do we go with chiller A, B, or C? They've got increases in efficiency, but they also have increases in cost, life expectancy, et cetera. I need to look at the total cost of ownership of some of these different designs. Good example is there was a new high school that was recently built by me. Again, as a facilities geek that I am, I was a bit livid when they built like this Taj Mahal high school, and yet up on the roof, they went and put like 160 some odd rooftop units because it was a lower initial cost of construction. But I also know that the facilities team, there's no way in the world they're going to be doing the quarterly PMs on 160 units just on that one building alone. But then two, you should expect 15 years out of those, but if they're not maintaining them, I'm going to be replacing them a lot sooner. So in 10 years or so, they're going to need 160 of those units replaced yet again. Whereas if they would have looked at a TCO analysis and said, rooftop units cheaper up front, maybe doing some air handlers with the AV boxes are going to be definitely cheaper and more efficient in the long run, well, let's go with those. But we have to be invited to the table to do that. The other thing to look at is that ratio, the 4-to-1 ratio. ASHRAE, did a study, and their report showed that in the typical life cycle cost of a 40-year life cycle cost of a building, okay, so we're just looking at 40 years, the cost of construction is 10 to 11%. The cost of operations and maintenance is 40%. Now, the other 50% is comprised of doing tenant improvements, financing, et cetera. But it's a 4-to-1 ratio. So there's such a driver on delivering it on budget, on schedule. But if we don't get involved up front in the beginning to drive the value at the total cost of ownership level, we're going to be paying a lot more for that in that 40% for the 40-year life cycle of that building. So it's important for us to get involved. And we will talk more about that in the leadership series. Now, from the bird's eye view for facility managers, what do we do within project management? Again, I want for us to be involved pre-design through post-construction and to insert value to the conversation, help us to make things more maintainable, flexible, because we know over a 40-year life cycle, for example, the demands and the needs are going to change. Technology is going to change, so we need to have some flexibility to the space. The role and the value of commissioning, but we'll talk about this some more too, is a commissioning agent, and I'll qualify that, a good commissioning agent can be invaluable to the success of the project, but also to the operations of the building. So making sure that you have a good commissioning agent on board, that you as facilities are fully involved, and ideally you've got your staff, whoever's going to be taking care of that building, right there in the hip pocket of that commissioning agent, especially when it comes to doing some of their functional performance testing, their integrated testing. Great learning opportunity for the staff, great opportunity for you to test the emergency operating procedures out and make sure that things operate as they should. The other thing is you're going to learn is the failure scenarios, because that's what a commissioning agent does. They try to break the building. What happens when this fails or this turns off? Do these other systems come online like they're supposed to? Great learning opportunity, and you get a chance to see how the system works. Transition to operations. I've only seen this done good a couple of times, where you look at, with respect to planning a project, you got the handoff from construction to operations. How do they go from taking the construction documents, the equipment information? I have to get that into my maintenance management system, get the equipment information in there, get the job plan set up, the PM scheduled, service contracts in place, procedures written, my staff trained, any critical spare parts on site, et cetera, et cetera. I got to get all that done, ideally before we even occupy the building. Because once we occupy the building, I'm going to start getting all the creature comfort calls, and people saying, can you hang this dry erase board? Can you do this? Can you give me a keyboard tray? A number of different things. As people get settled into a building, I won't have time to go back and put this stuff into the system. So it's really important for us to make sure that we plan for that transition to operation, get the right information from the contractor, and get it in a format that's easy for us to upload into maintenance management systems. So we're not having to hand enter everything all over again. Try to again, work smarter in doing this. And then, of course, equipping the FM team, making sure that, if you're hiring staff to take on this additional square footage, you need to get the approval to bring them on board at least during the back half of the construction, so they can be involved during that commissioning, the testing phases, and then helping develop the procedures and things like that. So big opportunity here, and we'll talk more about that in the leadership series. Moving on to real estate and property management. Real estate and property management itself, for me, it's two different perspectives. You've got property management and facility management, a lot of overlap in really what they do, but it is a lot about perspective. Facility managers tend to be more technical, tend to be more involved with the systems and day-to-day operations. Property managers tend to be more involved with leasing, keeping the space rentable, responding to service requests, and PMs, and again, I'm speaking in generalizations here, PMs are quite often less technical, and they just know, hey, I'm getting a hot cold call, I need to call my HVAC service contractor. So that's what they know, what to do. But again, a lot of overlap, but definitely change the perspective. Now, when it comes to an FM's role in property management, we do get involved in, or should be involved in, lease versus buy decisions. Should we lease this space? Should we go buy some space, and do a TI? I mean, what do we do? And we should be able to provide some input into that. And some of the steps are going to include, like the next one, finding and evaluating facilities. Quite often, facilities will be part of the assessment team. So they'll go out and assess the facilities, and maybe they've narrowed it down to 3 different buildings, and you're assessing the condition of the systems of the building. How much do you think you're going to have to put into it? What might you need to operate and maintain that building? Capital investments as well. So those are some of the things that you'll provide. It's important for you to understand lease constructs, because probably once you get to that manager director level, you likely will be managing some lease spaces. So you need to understand, what a triple net is versus a gross lease, and who's responsible for what, and possibly even calculating square footages, or at least being aware of how that's determined. And then, ultimately, I think when it comes to property management, your job is not to be the one-all be-all. You will have a number of different experts that are involved in this. A real estate expert, right? Somebody's going to help you walk through the leasing agreement. You're acting as the facilities expert, but you're part of the team. So that's really what facilities' role is in real estate property management. And we'll talk more about those lease constructs and terminology and square footage calculations, things like that, when we get into the session in the FM101 series. Sustainability and efficiency. So we're getting close to the end here. Sustainability and efficiency, basically, the trend is continuing to grow. I mean, most everybody's on the green bandwagon at this point. It's migrated from the public sector to the private sector. So you pretty much have full adoption at this juncture. And I have green for skeptics there because, again, I actually did a presentation a few years ago because there's a husband and wife team that are directors of an association, a facilities association, and wife very on board with sustainability efficiency. It's actually part of her job. The husband thinks it's all a bunch of phooey, doesn't believe in it at all. So we did a presentation for him called Green for Skeptics at an annual conference that they had, and I started it off basically saying that I don't care if you're a tree burner or tree hugger. It doesn't matter, because it doesn't. If your organization says that one of their top goals for this year is to increase efficiency, sustainability, guess what your job is? To increase sustainability and efficiency. Whether you believe in it or not, if that's where the direction of the organization is going, then you're part of that team and you need to head that direction. Now, there are ways that you can use that to your advantage, which we'll talk about. But one of the key concepts I want you to also understand is the triple bottom line. So I like to use this in conjunction with the rule of 100, 10, and 1. Triple bottom line, it's been around. John Elkington was the one that created this thing back in the 90s. It's also sometimes called people, planet, profit, but it looks at the financial, social, environmental bottom lines, if you will. And we can all think bottom line, think financial. But social, when you look at it, is one, how do people feel about coming to work? Right? If they're excited about coming to work, they're going to be more productive. If they aren't so excited about coming to work, or it's kind of a dreary, drab place, whatever it is, you're going to see that their productivity levels will not be as great. More days where they're absent, calling in sick, that plays into it, which of course is going to feed right into financial. The other side of it is looking outside of the organization. How does the customer perceive you? How are you perceived in the marketplace? That plays a huge impact. Most folks today shop by peer reviews, right? I mean, most of you probably shop off of Amazon or something like that, and you look at reviews. What do others say about this? That's a lot of what we have to consider too when you look at this social bottom line. Is that's how folks are buying, so we have to make sure that we're appealing to that side. So how are we viewed in the marketplace? And then the last is going to be environmental. And as we've already said, that trend is continuing to grow, be adopted. Environmental, the social responsibility, environmental responsibility, those things tie in a lot to buying decisions, especially for the millennials. And as the millennials continue to move into the marketplace themselves with their purchasing power, they're 7% larger than the baby boomers ever were in population size. So they will have a lot of weight and a lot of say, so a lot goes on, and environmental is one of the key things that they are looking at. So that, of course, will affect how you proceed from a social standpoint, which, again, will affect your financial bottom line. So these things all tie together. And it's important for us to understand that and the priorities that our organization puts on it. IFMA does a study every year, and I know I think the numbers from early last year that they had released said that they basically poll executives of different companies, and they ask them, is sustainability one of your top priorities? And they've been seeing year over year that that percentage of those executives saying, yes, it is a top priority for our company, has been increasing to where early last year, I think it was in the 80-90 percentile, where companies are saying that that is a top priority. So you need to understand that within your organization and use that triple bottom line when you're trying to justify some of your facility program improvements, capital improvements, because if you're trying to justify, let's say, an HVAC improvement just off of energy savings alone, not going to happen. You can get some incentives and whatnot, but it's still, the payback's going to be about equivalent with the life expectancy of the equipment. But if you can start leveraging the impact of productivity, the rules 110 and 1, and also the financial, social, environmental aspect of it, well, these are a lot more, we want to put in the magnetic bearing chiller, right, the turbo core chiller, a lot more efficient, a lot quieter. Yeah, it's a little more expensive, but it's, the efficiency is, 40% more efficient. You start showing them those numbers. Now I'm appealing to the social and environmental side of it. So we want to use all three of these bottom lines. And then ultimately, as I jokingly call it, playing the green card, where again you might not have enough between the financial, maybe even the social. You add on that green card, the environmental portion, you've got enough substantiation to your business case to get it approved because you're sitting on all three of those key points. Now, what are some things that we can do within our organization, both sustainability and efficiency? We can optimize operations, which simple maintenance practices, okay? Changing filters, cleaning coils. You're talking 30% energy savings by cleaning your coil. Just cleaning, the heating and cooling coils. We talked about making sure that your belts and your pumps and motors are aligned correctly. 15% energy savings. Simple little things like that that are just in our maintenance practices. Retro commissioning, great way. Some people can say like tuning up your building, but just going back and seeing how are my systems operating, adjusting maybe sequence of operations in your control system, scheduling, things like that. I used to actually manage a team that did commissioning, retro commissioning, and when we did retro commissioning, easily saw 15 to 20+%, and quite often 25% energy savings. That's just energy savings. Never mind, the systems are actually performing better. So now we're going to be driving improvements to the productivity, right? Creature comfort. So huge opportunities there. Leveraging controls and metering. How do we utilize our control system? It's a smart system. It can do a lot of things. Do we have alarms? Do we have trends? Do we have some algorithms set up that it can let us know, hey, I don't think we're operating efficiently here. These numbers don't add up correctly, and it can give you a little flag saying you might want to check into this. Huge opportunities. And then the last thing that I'll say here is you want to document and sell your savings. So you need to make sure we're capturing anything that we're doing from that sustainability and efficiency. And again, I'm going to look to see how is it benefiting across the triple bottom line and also the rule of 110 and 1. Document that, and I'm going to market it because I'm going to use that to help justify getting more investment so I can make further improvements. And again, we'll talk more about this in May's session, and then also specifically about systems and control systems in the operations and maintenance series. Now, this is the last slide really when it comes to the main topics I want to talk about. Managing relationships. As a facility manager or director, this is your primary job. Is to manage relationships. You're managing both up, out, and down. And when you look at managing up, it's with upper management. How do you interact with upper management, executives, the marketing, the messaging? Do you speak the language of business? Speaking being, I don't need them to understand how a chiller works. I don't need them to understand the technical aspects of facilities. I need them to understand how facilities impacts basically the bottom line. How does it impact business? So I've got to translate my technical understanding into the business understanding. That is to me probably one of the weakest elements that we have within a facility industry, but it's improving, and we need to keep trying to improve that. Outs, how do we manage the relationship with other department heads? So how are we interacting with those department heads? Are we sitting down with them, that MVWA management by walking around? Are we sitting down with them and finding out what are the goals for this year? What are some obstacles in your business? What's your department trying to do? And again, not facility related. I want to know just from a business standpoint so I can see how best I can help them, because I might be able to leverage that to get some of the stuff that I need. So understanding business needs. And then managing down, so staff. How do I motivate and lead the team? Crucial. And then to me, one of the key things is, as we hit a little bit earlier, I want each and every member of the team to understand the value of what they do, the value of the service they're providing, and how that impacts the organization. And then equip them to be able to message and market themselves. Come up with an elevator speech. Somebody asks, well, so what did you guys do anyway, right? How do they take advantage of that and use that to sell themselves? A lot of things that we'll talk about, and we actually have 3 different sessions covering this in the leadership series. One session for each one of these. So as we start wrapping up here, the FM101 series, again, this is the first session of the 7-part series, and this session, of course, is more of a high-level introductory, kind of getting you into some of the concepts that I want you to get out of this, and then we're going to get into now how do we start applying that and where the rubber meets the road. So the next session is going to be maintenance strategies and practices. So how do we start defining a maintenance program and putting that together? And then that's February. Then March will be leveraging a CMMS, a computerized maintenance management system. Also, depending on what acronym you want to throw out, it could be CAFM, etc. So we'll talk about some of those different ones. We'll also look at how do you talk about how do you implement, even how do you select one, and getting as much as you can out of a maintenance management system, because in my opinion, it is the nervous system for a facilities program. You need to have one. So we can definitely talk about that. Emergency preparedness. So that'll be April. We're going to talk about how do you set up an emergency response management program, develop emergency operating procedures, conduct drills, etc. So get into some of those high-level points that we made. Sustainability and efficiency. Capital replacement program. How do you set one of those up? Especially if you can utilize your maintenance management system to help you do that. We'll marry those two together. And then real estate and property management. Again, making sure you understand lease constructs, some terminology, and some of the other things that we as facility managers can provide, and some of our roles that we have when it comes to real estate and property management. That's the FM101 series that is going to be coming out, and it's going to span between now through July. Now, I've mentioned the leadership series. The leadership series, we're actually going to start that in April. So it will run concurrently with this one starting in April, and it's setting a vision and direction. So each one of these are different sessions. The managing relationships, budgeting and selling, and then we're going to get into that project management overview. So those are the 6 sessions that we're going to cover underneath leadership series. And then the operations and maintenance series is going to start when FM101 concludes. So basically August is when we plan to start operations and maintenance. And again, the intent of the O&M series is not to make it so that you're going to be able to go out there and troubleshoot, a boiler system. But the intent is for you as a facility manager to understand building systems at a high level, like the first one, an envelope. Well, what is comprised of an envelope? What are some things you should look for? And how do you, plan for, maintenance, replacement, et cetera. So those are the things we're going to look at, and making sure that you understand at a high level how these systems work, so that you can talk knowledgeably to your staff and even to your contractors, and when you participate in projects. We'll look at new technology, so we'll look at control systems, some of the new technologies out there, lighting. So we'll talk about a number of those when we get to the building systems new technology. And then how do we utilize that technology within our workspace, within our facilities. And that one is probably going to be pretty heavy on control systems. But what are ways that we can do things smarter to continue to drive efficiency of our systems and also improve productivity. So all those different sessions, I mean, you guys can pick and choose as a smorgasbord if you want. You know, I've got those at $49 each. But if you do purchase the series, for example, I know some of you have purchased the FM101 series already. You can purchase the entire series. You're going to have access to the recorded sessions. So all these will be recorded. This one's actually going to be posted up on YouTube as well, but the remaining ones are all going to be basically in the paid membership section of FM360's online portal, where on there you have the recorded sessions. There's going to be online templates like the EOP templates, the in your case or in your face business case example. All those are going to be on there. Plus, there's an online Q&A forum that that you have access to as part of the series, and that allows you to be able to ask questions of me and of the other students, if you will, the other participants, and leverage each other's experience. Because again, I don't know everything, and that's why I love teaching these classes, because and interacting with you folks, because I get to learn from you, and we can all share that knowledge together and continue just to make those improvements to our facilities program. And then I'll also have the PDFs of the presentations available online too for those that purchase the series. And then if you are interested, just real quick on the Road Warrior program, if you are interested in, let's say you like the O&M series and the FM101 series, or if you want to do the leadership series, if you join the Road Warrior program, which is a monthly membership or an annual membership, you get free enrollment in all the series. So any active series I have going on, you get free enrollment to them. And then you have access to all past recorded sessions. So any series that I've done in the past, which this is our first, but any series that we'll do, you will have access to all of them online, and the recorded sessions, plus all the related templates, tools, resources. And then there's a discussion forum that the Road Warriors can participate in the different series discussion forum, but there also is one for the specific for Road Warriors, so there's 2 separate discussion forums for them. So again, monthly or annual membership, and if you have, let's say, multiple staff members that you want to get involved with the Road Warrior program, there are some corporate discounts available, and basically they started, if you've got 5 people, you start getting percentage breaks all the way up to 25 or more, and you get a discount as much as 35%. And then one last note that I'll say on this is there's one more level beyond the Road Warrior program, and that's the Fast Track program. And basically it's all the same benefits as the Road Warrior program, but you also get one-on-one coaching and consulting, where we'll have monthly phone calls, and we'll go through and figure out, where do you want to go? We want to set that course, whether it's for your facilities program, or maybe you're trying to improve your career, or maybe both. But we'll figure that out together of what direction do you want to go. We'll put together a roadmap, and then we'll start you down that path. And we'll do these monthly check-ins to see how you're doing of going down the path, adjust the roadmap as necessary, but continue to help you improve your program, improve your career. And again, you still have all the access to all the online series and the online portal, et cetera. So that's available to you monthly, or you get a discount if you pay the annual fee there too. So all that said, I know we've ran probably longer than what I anticipated. There's a lot to cover. I'm going to try to keep these to about an hour and a half going forward, so it would be easier for us to stay within the time frame. But I'm going to open this up to questions. I've got you all muted, but if you raise your hand, I'll open up your line so that you'll be able to ask the question to everybody to be able to hear it. So I'll go ahead and do that now. Anybody have any questions that they want to throw out to us? The other option is you can throw something in the chat line. If you don't want to get onto the phone, you can throw something on the chat. Okay, so I'm scrolling up and down the list here, make sure I'm not missing anybody. All right, so no questions. You've got my email address there in front of you. You've got, of course, the website. I encourage you to check that out. There's a number of articles on there, and then other training that you can sign up for. So I encourage you, if you do have any questions, feel free to contact me. If you're interested in buying any of the series or joining the Road Warrior program, please dig around on our website and let me know that. There will be an evaluation that I'll have you complete as soon as we're done here. And I appreciate you taking the time. I look forward to meeting with those of you that already purchased the series as we launch into to maintenance strategies and setting up your maintenance program next month. So thank you again for your time, and y'all have a wonderful day.